I'm Matt, and I'm the one usually behind the camera here at the T. I say usually because there are exceptions, but for the most part, I'm the cameraman and editor for everything you watch on this channel. Now, we all have our own journeys and experiences that make us who we are. It's certainly been a journey for me as a video producer to get to this point in my life to be doing this, the T. Taking stock, I ask myself, how did God make all of this possible? My answer? By the people God has put across my path. God uses us all, in different seasons for different times, in the lives of everyone around us. Sometimes we remain unaware of how our own walk with the Lord affects and influences others, but there are the times where we feed encouragement purposefully into those that God clearly puts into our path. One such influential person in my life, Tim Finch, I can genuinely say I wouldn't be where I am today, doing what I'm doing, if it wasn't for this man. In this video, I sit down to talk with Tim about our shared past and how we can spot opportunities to make it happen for others around us. So welcome to Conversations on Making It Possible. What year did we first meet? It was 2004. It was the Pop Factory in Rhondda.
Yeah.
Do you recall the exact date of that?
Well, I can recall the Pop Factory.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be great with the specific date. All I do know is that Billy Engel was there in the midst of it all. And certainly it was through him, and I came up so many times in that era to the Rhondda from Somerset that, you know, I knew we met, but the exact date, Matt's going to be gone.
So how would you describe Billy Engel? Entrepreneur in the video sphere.
He was a professional TV producer, came over from the Netherlands. He used to work with EO, which is the Netherlands Christian production company. And they funded him to come over to film a TV series called Jacob's Ladder, which ended up on ITV Wales at the time. And that's what brought him to Wales. And it was through seeing that TV series myself on TV that I got in touch with Billy and we struck up a friendship. And he was living in the Rhondda, they'd done the TV production, and he was just keen to investigate how to, help people move into media in any way possible and try and facilitate that. And that sort of struck a chord with how I felt God had been calling me in that era of my life to move into media from a Christian perspective. So that was the connection, and so he was doing all these kinds of things like the events at the Pop Factory.
The Pop Factory was it was named that because it did used to produce some sort of soda, I think. Back in the day.
I don't know its history actually.
Yeah, but I'm sure that is the case.
But it was like a venue, wasn't it?
Now it's just a venue for events.
That's right.
And it was an event that had music. I think I kind of got involved because like the band from my church was playing.
Oh, I see.
That's kind of why I was brought along. So that's when we first met, and it was approximately 2004, end of 2004, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
But before that, I'll just briefly tell you sort of my story about getting to that point, because it's key to this whole story. That I loved video. I fell in love with video at an early age. I was the one on our family holidays with the video camera, doing really bad things with this camera that was just this tiny little black and white screen, And this is to my embarrassment, but we had a keyboard stand and a big flat desk, and I'd pretend, I was 9, I'd pretend to do the TV broadcasting news thing and record it and watch it back, as kids do. I enjoyed acting at the time as well, so I enjoyed being in front of the camera, but very much enjoyed the actual practicalities of being behind the camera as well. Yeah. And it was a school assignment in English, and we were assigned. This is when I was about 15, maybe 14, in comprehensive school, to record an advert, television advert, right. And all the other groups, just kind of did it in the class, and they all walked in, said something, and walked out. There's me, got our friends together, did a proper production in our house. It was called Rent a Friend, where people just rent friends because they're lonely, and it was like perfectly above board. But I fell in love with it. Yeah. So I pursued media and video in college and university. But so I basically had a personal trauma that really wiped me out just at the end of my first year in uni. Right. I barely scraped through my second year when I was still at uni, but I lost my passion for video. Everything video was associated with you know, the heartache and the pain that I was going through.
And what year are we talking roughly?
So this was 2002.
Okay, right.
So the majority 2002.
Right.
And I did a year out. I went to London, did the London City Mission volunteer thing, which was fantastic. But I completely lost my passion for video. Didn't want anything to do with it anymore. My parents kind of forced me to go back and finish the course because of, you know, there's money invested in it all, and I did that, and I stayed at home. I travelled back and forth to Bristol, which was a bit of a nightmare, but I went ahead and did it. It was the right thing to do. And then so coming out of that end of 2003, my university course, I just picked up some random jobs, you know, and there was no passion for it at all. And about a year or so later, so maybe into the middle of 2004. Just little glimmers, like friends. We were just hanging about with friends, and they had some ideas and things to shoot, and I kind of like begrudgingly got my little video camera out and shot something, and I thought, I still actually enjoy this. I still enjoy it, but there was no real avenue for pursuing it, you know, as a job at the time. You know, cue then meeting you at the Pop Factory.
Wow.
And I'd never I'd never met anyone working in video who was a Christian up until that point. So I guess at this point it's over to you. So what was your experience in video up to that point?
Yeah, no, it's a really good. Do you know, all the 18 years or so I've known you, and I didn't know some of those bits of the story, so it's great to hear it. So yeah, if I wind the clock back a bit, really the video journey for me starts in 2001. My training is all in IT, and I currently work as an IT consultant. And I got married in '99, so a couple of years into marriage, I was working, running the IT for the Message Trust up in Manchester. And just in the course of working there, I saw an advert flyer for something called the Christian Broadcasting Council Conference. This was autumn 2001. And I don't know, something in me, I just almost felt the Holy Spirit say, you go to this conference, you know, and I just thought, well, this is really important. I don't know why, this is really important. I need to go to this conference. And it was down in Stoke-on-Trent, so not far. We were living in Chester at the time, my wife and I, so, you know, not too far to go. 2-day conference. I think I just decided to go for one day. Went down one day and bought a ticket and just sat there. Didn't know anyone in the room. And it transpired to be frequented by all the people who at that time, and you know, it's astounding to think this is only a little over 20 years ago, and what change has occurred in media in these 20 years is phenomenal. But it was all the people who were involved in either wanting to set up Christian radio or running Christian radio, wanting or setting up Christian television in the nation. And so you were suddenly surrounded by people who were either on air or known if you ever tuned in to the channels that were around at the time, God TV being one of them, UCB Radio, London, well, Premier Radio as it is now, London Christian Radio as it started out in the late 90s. And so it was really fascinating to listen to speaker after speaker talking about this microcosm industry. And I just felt God say, I want you working in media. I want you working in media. And I'm sitting there just being like stunned because, you know, I'm working in IT, albeit in a Christian context. And so I spoke with a chap who was comparing that conference called Andrew Boyd, who I came to know quite well subsequently. And we went out and walked in the grounds around the conference centre and prayed. And I just really felt, and I phoned Barbie, my wife, up, who was working, so she wasn't with me, it was a weekday. And I said, you've got to come down to this conference, Barbie, something's going on, I don't know what it is. Anyway, I think the next day was a Saturday, maybe it was Friday and Saturday. She came the next day. Well, I wasn't going to come back the next day. And at the end of the day, I thought, I'm coming back tomorrow. So I think I brought Barbie with me. And from there, that was really the start of God calling me into media. So the following year, they had another conference, and I still had an old Sony High 8 video camera. Admittedly, a larger, poshish one, but it was showing its age by 2002. And that's all I had. So the next year I went back to the follow-on conference, and I took this camera with me thinking everyone is going to be coming with, you know, their equipment ready to film stuff. And I turned up and nobody was recording anything. And there was me, this upstart who'd not done anything really with this camera, and saying, "Can I interview you?" And I got out this microphone and just started filming people. And I did this one interview with a couple where I put it on a tripod over there, and we stood over here with the camera, and I was asking them all these questions. And when I looked back, the camera had moved like 20 degrees all of its own, pointing at some trees. Hadn't even filmed the people. It had moved off centre all by itself. You know, real, you know, totally unprofessional.
Right.
But it was an attempt to get into it and to just say, okay, God, I'm going to exercise somehow, not knowing what to do. And it was a bit like that, the whole journey over the next few years. And without going into all the detail, then I heard about this Jacob's Ladder program, and very much when I watched the first episode thought, there's a Christian behind this somewhere. This is really exciting. And there was they gave a method out at the end of one of the episodes to say, if you want to speak to the people behind this program, jump online, which was quite something in 2003, when I think it was. And that's how I met Billy. And by this time I was making contacts all over the place, and all kinds of things were developing. We started a news program called UK Christian News.
Yes, so
which we might come on to.
So that is what I think you were there, obviously, to discuss, you know, being a Christian in media. But I remember seeing some clips of that.
That's right.
You were talking about, I think, did you paint a wall in your bedroom green for the chroma key?
We were living in Chester at the time, my wife and I, and we wanted to start this program called UK Christian News. UCB Television, which actually I think is no more. They still very much run radio, and they've been a radio ministry for many years now. But they started and ran UCB TV sometime around 2004. And so through all these connections I was making, I got to speak to the head of that channel as he was sourcing programs. And I said, I'll make a news program for you, not realizing that it was the most expensive, hardest, you know, content to actually deliver.
Quick turnaround needed.
What am I doing? Anyway, and so what I did is I put together the first episode. Now, whether the Pop Factory content was in that first episode. Anyway, I took this 28-minute program, which I managed to edit together on very early computer-based editing kit. I mean, you know all about it, Matt. But this is 20 years ago. I mean, the stuff was steam-driven. And played it to him, and he said, yeah, sure, we'll take it, and I'll pay you to make 3 more. And it was like, what? Someone's actually going to pay me money to make some news programs. So that was 2004.
I think you were already established to a degree.
So maybe we were an episode or 2 in, and I was racing around the country trying to find things to film. So maybe that was the Pop Factory.
Do you remember our first conversation?
No.
I remember going up and speaking to you.
Yeah.
Just finding out a little bit about it. You know, there was no. There might have been a thing in the back of my mind going, oh, I could get a job, you know.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like, obviously that's not how kind of like the real world works in that sort of sense. But it was important to just say hello. I didn't know what was going to come of it, but just say hello.
Yeah.
And in my memory then, so time went on from then, the camera skills weekend.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's got to be Billy's house next, surely. Yeah.
So you and Billy decided to put on a camera skills weekend.
Yeah.
Which was just, for me, it was a solidifying moment where I realised I still, because I was still umming and ahhing, dipping my toes in, you know, no real course of getting behind a proper camera to do anything of significance.
No.
But that weekend really set in me, right, there's something still there in me to do this properly, and I can still do it, and I still enjoy it.
Yeah,
that was the most important thing for me, because you've got to enjoy what you do ultimately. And up until that point, I hadn't seen a path to that.
No.
So a number of people came together, and you brought all of your kit, and we had a go on the cameras. And
Billy went out and bought a load of cameras.
Did he buy those cameras specifically?
Yeah.
Wow.
And we had an old, what was it? It was an MX.
It was a big live mixer.
Live mixer.
You get the feeds in, so people.
It was all S. It was all S video.
Cameras.
Not too much tech, but you know, it was old school kit. You know, non-HD. You know, all the old 4x3. You know, it really was pre where we're at now. But yeah, we were. but our heart was just to give people the opportunity.
Yeah, and I came away from that really encouraged. I know you had my number from that point.
Yes,
so in the
that's
proceeding,
right.
And that was 2005. So in the following months, then you took some work in the Cardiff area, and you needed camera people.
That's right. Yeah.
So that was then a opportunity for me. You called me up. Obviously, you
right.
thought, okay, well, there's so and so people I've met a few months before, and I came in and helped you on some just camera operating on the jobs. Again, encouragement and just I was enthusiastic about getting hands on again. And at that point, what was it that? Is it just a practical, from your perspective? Is it just a practical needs must? I need camera operators. At what point do you start seeing potential in someone?
That's a really good question, Matt. Casting my mind back to that time, yes, there was a bit of needs must. If I remember rightly, it was a multi-camera shoot in some venue with seats that went up like that, unless I'm confusing it with another one.
Was it the Elim Church in Cardiff?
Yeah, it could have been. Yeah, it's the shoot I remember. Bit of a needs must, but I think by that point, what Billy gave into me, of all the people that I met in those early years, investigating God, how do I outwork what I feel is your calling to do media, and as a Christian, and where do I do it? Billy was instrumental in showing me how to always look for the positive way of including people to see how God might work in them. Because we hit it off when we first met. And not that I ever worked for Billy. He wasn't in a position to ever, he wasn't doing shoots himself at that point where he needed crew. But his whole idea was, how do I pass this on? How do I pass this on? And I imbibed that from him quite quickly. And I think probably already by that point, I was starting to think, yes, I need crew. Obviously, who do I know? And there weren't that many people I knew. But I think on the flip side, it was so obvious from that camera weekend that everyone was really enjoying it. And we filmed some content that I think was used in a few contexts. He'd set up a whole load of interviews. He had a whole load of people come and do interviews, if I remember rightly. And I thought, gosh, these guys are really excited who've come in to do this, and we treated it quite properly. We tried to run the shoot as professionally as we could, albeit just a training weekend. And so I think it was just realizing, these guys are really excited. They will love to come and do this again. So I think it was a bit of both, Matt, in all honesty. And I don't think, well, you will remember it better because it was your journey. I'm not sure I necessarily clocked quite that early, around 05, 06, that this was something that actually was going to be major in your life, which it clearly has turned out to be. But I certainly remembered you alongside a few of the others who we knew at the time as people who were really interested in this and would love to come and do something like this real world shoot for a paying client, who needed it for a purpose. So that's, I think it was a journey for me to realise that this was something that actually, I know you were very enthusiastic, I do remember.
Because there were at least maybe three occasions where you had me as crew. But then at some point it shifted from just, I need crew, to a point where there was talks of, well, what could it look like if I were to employ you?
Yeah.
Because that takes us up then right to 2007.
Yeah.
How did that shift?
I think, we obviously kept meeting on these shoots over those years. And whilst I don't specifically remember the progress, it became apparent that, of all the guys who were interested, you were really seriously interested in this. And I think, I can't remember what the shift was, but, there came a point, and it involves the work we ended up doing with Christian Concern, because the transition from we're enjoying this and these guys want to come and help to the point where you actually came to work for me, what was really key in all of that was the journey that I'd had in parallel to all of this over that same decade with Christian Concern. Because ironically, the first news article in the first UK Christian News episode that ever went out was me filming Andrea Williams from Christian Concern. And so I was tracking with everything she was doing, and my wife was at the time involved in the Lawyers Christian Fellowship, and of course Andrea is a lawyer, and so there were legal connections that we were developing with connections and they were quite interested in sort of influencing government policy and all of that side of things. So this was going on alongside to all of the media journey, and what converged really was as Andrea was getting closer to starting what became Christian Concern, or as it's now known as Christian Concern, that she was realizing we need to up our media game in a world that was developing into the YouTube generation. Of course, YouTube was starting all around this time, and this idea of video on the internet, people were getting broadband. We were emerging into what is now obviously a saturated world of media on demand over YouTube and et al. But that was the birth pains of it all. And so we get to about 08, 09, she was needing to capitalize on that for the work that they were doing at Christian Concern, and willing to start funding it properly. So what we had was a convergence, I think, of your excitement, the development of the ministry that God had given me into one that was starting to pay, and the realization that TV is not something you want to do on your own. I'd done too many shoots carrying kit on my own, which of course was heavy and bulky in those days.
So there was a number of things, as you say, that led up to the decision.
Yeah.
And then you set me a task. You thought, right,
I
think we'll go for this.
Yeah.
And rather than a formal interview, you set me a task.
I did.
What did you send me?
Do you know, it's one of the best things I ever did, this one. So I was thinking, I had already got to know you, albeit we weren't together on a daily basis like we then became for a season. But I thought, what can I do here? I don't need to sit down and do a formal interview. It's only me and Matt. But there's got to be some hurdle. What can we do? And I think we were out in a garden centre as a family, at the time, and I went past one of those twirly stands, you get in garden centres where there's, nameplates all on it, John, Jane, Pete, Mary, Sue, and all that kind of stuff. And below me there was Matt and Hannah, and I thought,
Hannah being my fiancée.
Yes, that's right. I thought, all right, I'm going to buy these nameplates. I'm going to send them to Matt and basically say, right, Matt, we're not going to formally interview you, but before you come and work for me, here are 2 props. Go make a video with them.
Yeah.
Up to you. Look forward to seeing the results. And that was it. That was basically the brief.
Yeah.
And you tell the story from there.
Well, I put this together a little video. I won't go into the narrative of it all, but it was the first time I'd ever really done anything like that. There's me and 2 other people I was directing, and shot considerations and all that jazz. And I told this little narrative that obviously had a Christian message in it.
Yeah.
And there we go. I was quite proud of it. I thought it was okay. Certainly for the first time I'd ever put anything of like a little drama, mini scene together. And it came out well, and obviously liked it, and I thought, way to go.
It was amazing.
But we didn't immediately jump in to work together, because there's the weekend of Salford. Which came before, which was a difficult weekend. But how much did that...
That was 2008, and that date is indelibly impressed on my mind.
Just very briefly, how would you summarise what... Top level down, how would you summarise what happened that weekend?
Oh, man. So, by 2008, so in 2001, I told the story at the beginning where I felt God called me to go to a CBC conference, Christian Broadcasting Council conference, and that was where I felt God say, I want you involved in media. Fast forward 7 years, and there's lots of parallel tracks in this whole story of mine that parallels with yours. And one of them was I kept involved with Christian Broadcasting Council, CBC. And by 2008, it's a little bit before then, I was on the board of CBC. Small organisation, but one that's very much focused on, trying to triumph the development and the role of proper Christian-based broadcasting, because it was very much in an emergent season. over that decade. And so I was involved in helping run the conferences by 2008, and we were hosting one annually. We did one every year, and this particular year was in Salford in Manchester, or near Manchester, and we called it From Generation to Generation. And by that point, very much thinking, how can those who were the older aged members of the Christian media community begin to think about encouraging the next generation? And so I thought, I know someone who would probably love to come to this conference, but probably wouldn't be able to afford it or something like that. But we need hands on deck. I'll phone up Matt. Matt, come and help us run this conference, and we're going to film it whilst we're at it. It's a chance to sort of practice again, and you'll be able to hear all these amazing speakers, and maybe God will do something with it. So that was and so by with this journey that we'd gone on since we met in 04 to 08, clearly by that point, I was very much thinking, how can I encourage you, generation to generation? I know we're not greatly different in age,
because the task you set me came before that, and it was there wasn't a right. We're going to produce this little drama piece, and we've set a date for you to start. It wasn't like that.
No,
it was
wasn't.
Still open ended at that point.
It was, yeah.
Still searching for the right time and opportunity.
Yes,
but it was kind of clear that we that was where we were heading.
Yes.
And then this weekend.
Comes. So part of the conference is an awards night. So it's a 2-day conference, speakers and people, at this conference. But then in the middle of the 2 days is an awards ceremony. And actually lots of other people from sort of the edges of the Christian media industry or religious departments in mainstream media come to this awards ceremony. So of course, posh dining and tables were all done up and all done very well. And we had the bright idea of filming it, which hadn't been done before at previous CBC awards ceremonies. But we thought, no, come on, let's film this, because it will make great television to go out on now these developing Christian TV channels. And so I said, Matt, we need people to come and help, and we're going to film the awards ceremony in the evening. And my very good friend Richard Lawrence had all the right equipment, an outside broadcast vehicle, and he was at the conference. So come on, let's film. And we were filming the conference, and that was okay. But we got to the awards ceremony. We'd got auto cue set up on the front camera, and then
I can cut you there and just say it was a difficult night.
It was a difficult night,
and we needed 3 times the amount of crew.
We needed 3 times the amount of crew, lots more money, and the font size on the autocue was too small, and the lights were too bright. So the presenters, all the script was written, and of course what we'd got you to do was try and cut together all the little 20-second clips.
Yeah. You sprang that on me about 2:10 in the afternoon. Because I had to edit the little snippets,
the 20-second,
clips,
bronze, silver, gold
winners,
kind of,
and then that for about 20 awards, and
which I'd only half finished because we'd run out of time. And
it was a challenge. But,
it was a challenge.
But I remember you saying something along the lines of that that cemented in you, I guess, seeing something in me.
Do you know, Matt?
Not to blow my own trumpet, but
I haven't thought about it for a long time, and here we are talking about it. So I'm coming back to this story fresh from 2008 as we talk about it. But, all kinds of nuances about that evening are coming back to me. I feel so bad for the people on stage because they just couldn't read the autocue, and that was just so embarrassing for everyone. But there was something in the failure of that weekend which I think ultimately God was at work in. Because if you didn't know that you wanted to be trying to make media that respects and reflects God, which was really that was really the phrase that I lived on over those years, to make media that reflects and respects God. If you didn't know in your knower, inside your heart, you wanted to do this, that was the weekend that would have ended involvement in media and could have done for me. But it was such a catastrophic failure filming that award ceremony that night. What I saw in you was, whilst you were clearly exhausted like the rest of us, and it really did us in, you absolutely rose to the task for negotiable pay, shall we put it in those terms? And you honestly, Matt, you delivered and you focused and you went for it. And I did see something new. I thought, gosh, if you've survived this night, because I'd been working in media quite a bit up to that point, and I'd realised just how tough it can be. And there was you coping admirably with it, and we were still on speaking terms after the weekend. So yes, you know what, Matt, it's absolutely true. I did see something in you. I thought, well, this crystallises it for me, that as and when we're able to work together and we'll find a way, I think this is going to work. So yes, you're absolutely right.
But it wasn't much longer after that.
No, it wasn't.
So I came and started working for you in December 2008. And that was an interesting setup because you just worked from home.
Yeah, yes, it wasn't great at the beginning. We needed some space.
A second, you had in your bedroom a little desk in the corner with another computer on, and I did
we
the work
started
I was
there.
doing.
Gosh, yeah, that's right.
I was working at the time in a call centre, a job I hated. That was my day-to-day job. And I was able to, I went down to 3 days a week there.
Right. And you came down to me.
Drove up morning, stayed a night, worked the second day, and then went home.
Yeah.
We did that for a number of months leading into mid-2009.
That's right.
But what sacrifice did you make to enable that all to happen?
Well, I have to really credit my wife, Barbara, here as much as anything, because in that era of that decade, really, 2004 onwards, my wife was working as a lawyer. And really in those days, without her income, as a young family, we wouldn't have survived. Because whilst, increasingly there were ways to generate revenue making the media, and that really peaked with the work with Christian Concern, which we did a lot of together. Without my wife's income, we wouldn't have made it through. And especially then choosing to take you on and pay you something, whilst it couldn't be, a livable wage at that point. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I know it was, it was what we could manage. But really, it was down to my wife being willing at that point to work and carry on in her career at that point in time. So, that's really how we made it happen, Matt. But we were wanting to try and forge a way, and it was, do you wait until a way is made and then you walk down it, or do you get out your pickaxe and start cutting through the jungle and say, right, I've made a way? And it really was more of the latter than the former in many ways. But of course, what we quickly realised is we can't occupy in this space much longer. And through the church connections I had in Taunton at the time, an office became available in the centre of town, which transformed things, because now we had 2 rooms rather than us sharing one cramped room. And I was out of the house, which was crucial, really, especially as our second child was due any second. We moved into the office, didn't we? And then that's really where I think we were able to go, a little bit of space.
So for the majority of 2009, all of 2009, I was working. I can't remember exactly.
I think you came down 3 days. It was 3 days, yeah.
Somewhere around August, maybe sometime in the summer, I went into 3 days and went down to 2 days of the other job.
That's right.
In that year, I learned so much.
Yeah.
In the practicalities of kind of running a business and just simple things like things I still do to this day in media, with file structures of having a template.
Oh, come on, you're still using my folder structure.
Folder structure.
Something good happened
for a new project.
Excellent.
There's just things that I just pick up and do.
I'm most encouraged to hear that.
About it. So I learned so much in the practical and just in so many ways. Can I ask you, what did you learn in that whole experience of having a little young whippersnapper working with you, and just be, ultimately as an employee, yes, you had to instruct me and give me tasks, but what did I bring and what did you learn through it?
I think one of the things that crops up to mind is the responsibility. I have to turn up every week. We need to have something to do, It's not just me now that I've got to keep myself occupied with. There's someone coming on whatever day of the week, maybe Tuesday, whatever day you came, and I've got to have something for you to do. So I think for me, it was the managerial side of things. It's one thing just, getting a camera out and filming and then coming back and editing it and then sending it off either for TV or whatever it is. Now there's the managerial side. There's the finance side. We've got to be able to work out how to pay for things. So I think for me, that was one of the things that came But I think also just looking at it from a Christian walk point of view, just to have someone to walk this road with, because I found working in media, amongst many other things that were very costly and difficult, it was exceptionally lonely. Despite CBC and these national connections with people who I was getting to know and could trust, people I could call on to say, please will you pray, X, Y and Z's going on right now, and that certainly happened a few times. Roger Stanway comes to mind, still someone I would phone first when something crops up. You're just on your own. And just the joy of working in, albeit two of us, community, and that converging with all kinds of things like camera kit becoming more reliable, slightly more compact, converging with the development of online delivery, we could begin to look at how can we deliver direct and not have to rely on big media, output to get something on air, converging with working with Christian Concern, as we did a lot of that year, not solely, but a lot of. So we had something to get our teeth into, filming things in and around Parliament. There was just a golden moment, really, 2009, I would say, where the funding, the opportunity, the equipment, and the camaraderie of doing it together really came together. And it was quite a good, it didn't sadly go on as long as we'd like to have done, as I'm sure we'll come on to. But, that particular year was quite dramatic,
And then beginning of 2010, or it may have been towards the end of 2009, it became clear that decision had to be made with regards to the business.
Yeah.
Which was very hard for you.
Well, one of the things I learned as a manager, and it was a limited company, so a director of a business, is which I've been very aware of in all the things that I've done since, is don't rely on one contract. And what we had really there, just in pure business terms, was a business that was funded predominantly from one contract, and then lots of other piecemeal bits that went with it. And then that one contract was cancelled, and the piecemeal was nowhere near enough. However, just through careful, management of money, we'd actually built up a bit of reserves in the bank account. And so in early 2010, when this main contract ended, and therefore the money stopped, and almost immediately, I thought, well, okay, current costs and so forth, we can keep going for quite a few months. And let's just see what else is out there, And so at the beginning of 2010, it was very much one of, okay, let's move into marketing mode. And we did quite a bit of work to try and connect with people who could potentially bring work to us. But it became clear that wasn't going to happen. And it was around April, May, when I thought either I have to close this business whilst I still have the choice, or it's going to close me. Yeah. And so we had to make the very difficult decision. And it was only around 18 months after you started, back when there was two of us in the corner of the room at our house, had to actually close the business, which, we're middle of 2010, we're 9 years on from when I first went to the CBC conference, when I felt God say to me words to the effect of, this is your life, I want you to do this. And I took that to mean this is what I'm going to be doing from now on. I'm going to move out of IT, which was my training, and I'd been working in all the years before. I'm going to do IT, and the IT was always there, and of course with computers and editing, the IT had a part. But my focus will be in Christian media, and it all came to a crashing stop with the closure of the business, having to let you go in the middle of 2010. Was very, very tough thing to do. It hit me hard.
Yeah. So immediately after that, I was kind of like, bit at a loose end, I guess. But I mean, you really encouraged me, and in August 2010, then I started my own business, self-employed, just sole trader, and you encouraged me to do that, and I created a little brand, and I picked up a great contract with someone I'd known online who gave me some work, and and there we go, and that saw me through for the next 10 years, kind of thing. But in the years since then, you've always been there at the end of the phone to, encouragement, and I've always sought advice on not just, my computer's crashed. Can you give me some advice? What
would you do? A few of those phone calls.
Yeah,
if I remember rightly, because of course I returned to IT. So
yes. But more than that as well, I've called you in relationship advice with colleagues and how to deal with certain situations.
Yeah.
So my question comes: at what point in this whole journey do you recognize that you've become like a mentor figure to someone? And did you recognize that with our relationship? Yeah. And
that's a good question, Matt.
And then what responsibility does that put on someone moving forward?
Yeah, no, I certainly recognize it now. I think if we start...
Or did you not recognize it at the time?
Well, I certainly recognize it now. And we're going back 12 years to when I had to let you go. So there's been a transition in our relationship from working together. And we both honestly assumed we'd be doing it for quite some time and hoped that it would grow. And I think, not that we ever talked about it, but we could have seen it with other people joining us. I think we'd have loved to have seen that happen. To the point now where you're doing what you're doing with the tea, and I'm not as fully involved in media as I once was. So yes, that year, and I think probably one of the things that was a salve to the wound of having to shut the business and realise, at least in the middle of 2010, it felt like a crashing end to my involvement in media, which had been building and building and building for 9 years, was, oh gosh, Matt's started his own little business. He's got this contract. Okay, I even came and helped you shoot on one of them.
You did, yes, on the second or the third contract with the same client.
Came up with you to the southeast, and we did that 1 or 2 day shoot there, however long it took. This we're talking here. This wasn't Christian media, was it? This was just straightforward, corporate media production. Yeah. And so quite quickly I saw, gosh, Matt has moved on in leaps and bounds. Even by that point, I remember when we did that shoot, and I could tell, and you were running it, and I was coming to help you, and I wanted to be available to you in any way I could. I think I probably bought some kit, but it was your shoot, it was your client. And I could already see, gosh, you are moving forward at such a pace with your skill set and your ability in this. And I think that was a real salve to me at that point in time, realizing some real good's come out of this. It might have ended quite catastrophically or disappointingly, should I say, in 2010. But actually, there's real fruit here. And I think it was episodes like that when I realized it's going to live on, but in a different shape to what I presumed it was going to be. And by that point, I'd started a new IT business, which I'm still running now. And so I could see that God was providing for our family, but back with my more traditional training and skill set. And that this was going with you. And I think also mixed with that over these years, as you've alluded to in your opening question here, just these out of the blue phone calls, Tim, this is going on. And we would spend some time and you would explain to me. And just a real sense that I want to be there to listen and hear and just pray with you over the phone. And I think we can say we saw God bring good results out of some very tough scenarios you found yourself in. And I think also, Matt, getting those phone calls, whilst I didn't know the situation until you phoned up and told me about them, I spent 9 years trying to develop something as a Christian, in media. And it was a highly opposed area and arena to operate in as a Christian. Yeah. And, I believe there is a devil, and I believe there are forces that come against, the works of God, without going into the detail of it. So I'd lived a bit of that. And here you were on the phone saying some situation or another had been going on, and what do I do? And I thought, oh, I remember this. I've been not perhaps the same situation, but I've been here where you're coming up against things that need some delicacy and some diplomacy, but also some wisdom. So I think, Matt, it was just, seeing that God was clearly going to move you on in media and your phone calls, and I thought, I can still be available when you need it, at the end of a phone, 100 miles away or whatever it is, to just sort of pray and listen when you need it. And praise God, here we are today, still in touch, and you don't phone as much, and that's because I see you're in a new environment where you've got the people around you that you need. But I think that has been a real encouragement these last 10 years to think, and to see the fruit, Matt, of what God is doing with you and your church and the media that's now being produced. And I think, gosh, I had a hand in this somewhere. Perhaps it's not the outcome that I would have thought in 2010. Where will we be in 2020? Well, not in a pandemic, but who saw that coming? But nevertheless, what I am seeing with perhaps older, wiser eyes is how God works out his purposes. And he thinks in decades. He doesn't think in months and days.
Well, on that, I believe truly with all of my heart, I would not be where I am today if it wasn't for your influence in my life.
Wow.
And it's as simple as that. You could argue the flip side that if you hadn't have come into my life, or God would have brought someone else along, maybe to have encouraged me in the same way. But from those early years of just encouragement and having me along, building up, obviously seeing something in me, employing me, the year that we had together where I learned and learned and learned, and the encouragement since, that we are the sum of our experiences, aren't we? And I would not have been in the place to be doing what I am, and with stepping out into my own self-employed business, how that gave me all the tools and the equipment I needed to start the Worship Effect.
Yes.
With the team back early 2017, and then what has become the T. I simply wouldn't be in the same place if it wasn't for your involvement in my life. So for that, I need to give you honour, and I say thank you for everything that you've sowed into my life, and our pastor John, when he first started the church, going back 23 years ago, he was given a number of words saying, if you don't step into this and start this church, there will be other people who miss out on their destiny, ultimately. And that's a weight of responsibility.
It is.
That's a huge weight of responsibility. And I feel that very much in a similar way now, in being someone who can facilitate others. We've got a very small team at the T at the moment, but I know that's not going to be the same, in future moving forward. And it's a weight of responsibility that to take on oneself, to be able to spot the potential, encourage people. Obviously, in this case, it's sticking a camera in someone's hand and say, "Go and shoot." But for the wider church, how do we make ourselves open to being a father figure or a mother figure, or a mentor? Now, it seems like having this conversation, you didn't twig that in those days, in initially, as you've said. But how do we become open to God's hand saying, "There's some potential in so and so over here."
Yeah, this is a really...
This person is going to be doing X, Y, and Z in 10 years.
You hit on a really important question, and I'm not sure how much time we've got. And in the course of the old days, we'd be very aware the tape's about to run out.
That's all right.
Of course, we don't have those problems anymore. Listen, I think there's a number of answers coming in parallel to my mind as you ask this question. How do we spot potential? How do we pass on to people who are perhaps showing an interest in something that God has blessed us in, given us gifts in, abilities in, and how do we bring them on? I think there's a number of things. I think, first of all, part of what gets you ready for that is when you've received it yourself. And whilst also my time with Billy Engel was short because he and his wife moved to America, and the overlap there was probably only 2 or 3 years, just his whole demeanour about making things possible for somebody was engendered onto me. I also think it's really important that we understand about the stages of our lives, and this has really been crystallised to me by the American author John Eldredge, who, amongst many of the things that he's written and talked about, he talks about the stages of man, and really the core of John Eldredge's ministry is one of pastoring men's hearts, and how can he help men who know and love the Lord move fully into all that God's got for them. And so again, over all the time period we've been talking about, the last 20 odd years, I've been very much imbibing and listening to his kind of teaching. And he talks about the stages of man, amongst other things, and that it's really important that we recognize what stage are we in. And if I'm going to remember them correctly, boy, this is Americanism, of course, boy, cowboy, warrior, king, sage. So now we wouldn't use cowboy, we might use adolescence, perhaps. And so if we can just sort of chart that, and the warrior stage is typically sort of late teens through to 30-ish. King, it was small k, kind of referring 30 through 55, 60 maybe. And sage, they all kind of overlap. It's not like they suddenly have shelves and, they all kind of overlap. Sage is when you recognize towards your end of the life, what you can bring is wisdom to another generation. And I think, whilst I won't delve into the detail of all of those, just this idea that we transition through life and realize that actually things change. And when you're a warrior, the whole idea then is that you're aware, gosh, I can go out into the world and I can do something and I can go for it. And,
that would have been me coming to work for you.
And I wasn't that far, in terms of years, 2001, come into the media, right, I'm going to get my camera out, I'm going to go and shoot some interviews at this conference. And even though I didn't lock the tripod off, Matt, so it moved 20 degrees, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to conquer as a warrior, as a warrior, yeah. And then king really represents, when you become accomplished in something, and maybe a career choice or something, or if it's a ministry area, a pastor who's pastored a church for 20, 30 years is accomplished in it, not satisfied and sit back, but just you've been through so much. You are aware of all that takes place in church leadership or ministry leadership. And I think if we can be aware of those stages of life, I think that can then prepare you, okay, who is coming out of adolescence into warrior when you're king? How can you give to them? And if you went through that yourself, okay, I know what stage they're at. So my wife and I are house group leaders in our church that we're in down in Taunton at the moment. And we're a teenager household. We've got a few families with very young preschool age children in our house group. We remember parenting at that stage, What can we give them that now we don't have to worry about babysitters and all of that for our kids? But these guys, some of them are still dealing with, waking up 2 or 3 times a night with, toddlers, etc. And so it's just always seeing who is on the journey we've been on, And so I think it's not just in this media journey that we've been focusing on, it's that as well. And that's what's led into it.
It's applicable to the wider church.
It is, yeah. But I think in terms of what you're talking about, our journey together, I would say John Eldridge has opened my eyes over these years to how should we look out for others. And also it works the other way. Who are we looking up to? Who are the kings above us or the sages above us who we can tap into and listen to and seek counsel from when we're needing that journey? And I think this is why this is the beauty of the church, is that God brings people together across all spectrums, ages, demographic, and somehow it works. Whereas we typically in a secular environment, we will gravitate to our contemporary. But it's amazing how when God can bring these people together, they all realize who they are in their stages of life to work together. It is just an amazing, beautiful thing. But yes, I think, I would summarize and say, John Eldridge, stages of man, that's how we can look to see how can we mentor. Do you know, Matt, it's so wonderful to see, and I think God has accelerated your gifting, and I could see that quite clearly even in that contract that I came to help you with, 10 years ago maybe, not quite, but even then, you were so aware of what was needed in a professional paid shoot, that God was accelerating your gifting and your ability in this. And to think now, 10 years on, God has provided you an environment where you are able to pass that on already. At a relatively young age, it's not taking another 10 years before you get to do that. You're already doing it. I think that is a real joy to see. And I was only just talking to Billy and Marcia, his wife, the other day, saying, you need to watch this video that Matt Evans has just sent me a link for. They've just put out this series that's on their YouTube channel. Said, this is the product, this is the grandchild of your investment in me. Because now Matt is doing this. And I said, watch this, because this is just, not just for the content, which itself was fantastically done. But I said, I wanted to remind them, because they're not here to see it.
Sure.
It is to see the fruit down the generations is quite important.
Well, Tim, it's been a pleasure to have you here and to just chat.
It's been a great trip down memory lane. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Once again, I see you as a father to this work at the T.
Yeah.
And it's important that you know that as well.
We're doing this in 2024. I wonder what conversations we'll be able to have subsequently. 2028, 2030, who knows? But the journey is not over.
Thank you, Tim.